Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends, old and new, and have honest conversations. Let me begin by saying Happy New Year. Today we begin anew, a fresh start, a new beginning. As is tradition here on the podcast, I would like to share some information from the 200th edition of the Baer's Agricultural Almanac and Gardener's Guide. Almanacs have always been a very important part of life for the Pennsylvania Dutch, and I always looked forward to my grandparents picking up the new edition of the Almanac every fall. Baer's is typical. It gives the phases of the moon, planting guides, weather forecasts, stories, and jokes. As a kid, I loved to read this. As you already know, I wasn't a typical kid in the 1990s. I don't think most of my friends enjoyed reading agricultural almanacs. Almanacs have always played a very important part in the lives of the Pennsylvania Dutch and of many agrarian societies throughout American history. It was a source of information and a source of entertainment. And the Baer's edition, published in Lancaster County, is the one that was always purchased in our family this time of year. And this year's Baer's Almanac is their 200th edition. Unbelievable. So I'd like to take you through and, of course, remind you a couple things that the Almanac is telling us, and you can use that information as you see fit. But this is an Almanac for the year of our Lord, 2025, being the first year after leap year until the 4th of July, the 249th of American independence. Next year's going to be the really big one, fellow Americans, 250 years, my goodness. But this year, we got to make it through this one first. So a couple things from the Almanac, as it says, and I'd like to read this part first. A lot of American businesses do not get to the 200-year mark, but we are pleased to have reached it. Baer's Almanac began in 1825 as a publication called the Agricultural, put out by William Albright. In 1828, John Baer, a Lancaster publisher and printer, bought Albright's publication. Baer's sons, and later their descendants, published the Almanac annually until 1949, when Gerald Lesd, a newspaperman, began a 62-year endeavor as the Almanac's editor. After Letz's death, his daughter, Linda Weidman, took up the charge. During John Baer's lifetime, an almanac was a critical asset to farm life in the region. Think back. There were no radios or TVs, no internet, no up-to-the-minute weather alerts and emergency warning systems. Today, we try to keep the almanac relevant by offering all of the traditional, useful charts and tables in a handy format, and we also try to give a glimpse of the vast and often noble history of our great country. So they've prepped us. Now I think it's time to jump into the Almanac and see what Baer's has to report for 2025. For the year 2025, Venus is the reigning planet. And what does that mean? Venus is a brilliant star and is next to the sun and moon the most conspicuous. Completes her course like the sun once a year. Her nature is damp and warm, is a so-called feminine planet, temperate, benevolent in all her aspects, and is generally known as Fortuna Minor. Makes the feminine sex pretty, gives them long hair, well-shaped faces, beautiful eyes, but they are generally addicted to idleness and luxury. Venus governs the following functions of the human body: kidneys, breast, throat, loins, liver, and nasal organs. Under this planet, the year is wet, sultry, and at times very hot. Spring begins late, is temperate and favorable to the culture of fruit and grain. Summer, if dampness in spring is of long duration, a sultry, warm summer is the result. But if spring is rainy, drought and great heat prevails during the summer, and it frequently occurs that hay and grain will rot in the field. If an eclipse of the sun occurs during the months of February, March, April, or May, grain, as a consequence, is very small. Fall will begin warm and fair, but changes very soon. You should therefore be careful to sow your winter grain in time. Winter is mild in the beginning, dry, from the 12th of February to the opening of spring. Very wet during that time. Showers with disastrous results are of frequent occurrence. The Almanac also lets us know those dates that move throughout the year and what they are for this year. In 2025, Shrove Tuesday, or Mardi Gras, or as we Pennsylvania Dutch say, Fasnacht, the day that we eat our Fasnachts, falls on March 4th this year, with Ash Wednesday being the 5th of March. Put that on your calendar, my dear friends. And finally, also along those lines, Palm Sunday will be the 13th of April, and Easter of 2025 falls on April the 20th. Being a history nerd, even as a kid, I always loved that the Almanac would share things that were celebrating major anniversaries in the year that the Almanac was coming out. So I have some, of course, for this year. So we go to the 300th anniversary. These things happened 300 years ago in 1725. The first newspaper in New York, the New York Gazette, was operated and published by William Bradford. 250 years ago, in 1775, Patrick Henry coins the phrase, "Give me liberty or give me death," in a March 23rd speech, and Paul Revere famously goes on his ride on April 18th. The Second Continental Congress meets in Philadelphia, appointing George Washington as commander-in-chief. In March of 1775, Daniel Boone and 30 wood choppers are sent by Transylvania Company to cut a wilderness road. The first abolition society is formed as the Society for the Relief of Free Negroes Held in Bondage in Philadelphia by Benjamin Franklin and Benjamin Rush. And finally, Yankee Doodle becomes popular as a rallying song used to taunt the British. 200 years ago, in 1825, on the 9th of February, the House of Representatives decide the 1824 election, declaring John Quincy Adams the winner thanks to support by Henry Clay. This does create a schism in the Democratic-Republican Party. In February of 1825, Monroe institutes a policy to remove all Indians east of the Mississippi onto land into the West. Later that year, the Erie Canal is completed, signaling the beginning of a great era of canal building, and the canal is opened by Governor DeWitt Clinton. 150 years ago, in 1875, in September, a murder conviction leads to the breakup of the Irish miners group known as the Molly Maguires. For those of us in Pennsylvania, we know that story. George F. Green, a Michigan inventor, patents an electric dental drill on January 26. Green had previously patented a pneumatic dental drill powered with a pedal-operated bellows. I don't think I'd like to be on the other end of that drill from 1875. Also that year, the very first Kentucky Derby was held at Churchill Downs, and the winner was Aristides with a purse of $2,850. That was a lot of money back then. Celebrating its 100th anniversary this year, back in 1925, in January, Wyoming inaugurates the country's first woman governor, Nellie Taylor Ross. In May, John T. Scopes, a Dayton, Tennessee public school teacher, is arrested for teaching Darwin's theory of evolution. He is tried in July and defended by Clarence Darrow. Scopes loses and is fined $100. The Pulitzer Prize for fiction goes to Edna Ferber for So Big. Also published in 1925 are F. Scott Fitzgerald's Great Gatsby and Dreiser's An American Tragedy. And the New Yorker magazine is founded by first editor Harold Ross. 50 years ago, in 1975, we see in September the 18th, actually, Patty Hearst, kidnapped heiress, is captured by the FBI. In July, Jimmy Hoffa, longtime Teamster Union leader, mysteriously disappears, and Jaws breaks all box office records across the United States. Also that year, the United States Military Academy at West Point admits 118 women for the very first time, and the Naval and Air Force academies also include women. So there's a little bit of history going back, some really cool stuff. That John Quincy Adams election, and you really need to look that story up. That's a good one. That's a good one. And also, I do have to give a shout out. 1925, 100 years ago, was also the year that my paternal grandfather was born. So he would be celebrating, if he was still with us, his 100th birthday this year, which is crazy to think about. The Baer's Almanac also always includes jokes and funny stories to tell. So from this fictitious person called Abner Americanus, as they say, an ancient sage. And here are his points to ponder for 2025. 90% of bald people still own a comb. I guess they just can't part with it. The soldier who survived mustard gas and pepper spray is now a seasoned veteran. And finally, Horses have lower divorce rates. It's because they are in stable relationships. So there's just a quick tour of this year's 200th edition of the Baer's Agricultural Almanac and Gardener's Guide. It is available on their website. You do have to order it via mail. I will put a link in the show notes. If you want to get your own Baer's Almanac, you can do that. But so here we are. We are in a new year. That was the 200th episode or edition of the Baer's Almanac, and this episode of Doug's Front Porch is our 95th episode. I still can't believe that. That means that this year, later on, we will celebrate our 100th episode. That really blows me away, to be honest. And I do have something pretty cool planned for that one, since that's a pretty big one, but I can't give the secret away yet. I want it to be a surprise. But remember that you can always go back and listen to all other 94 episodes anytime you want, wherever you get your podcasts from. And I would ask, hey, please share the Front Porch love with all of your friends and family. You can always check out our Zazzle shop as well to get your Front Porch swag. But 2025 is now here. A new year, a new beginning. And for us in America, 2025 brings truly a new start as a new administration takes control of power in Washington, D.C. For some Americans, they can't wait. For others, they definitely can. Time will tell what direction our country will travel in 2025. I truly hope that it will be a prosperous and peaceful one. I wish that all of you can find joy and good health this year. And I would also challenge all of you to truly engage with your fellow man as much as possible. We have divisions in our society, and we must strive to bridge the gaps and differences that stand between us. As President Lincoln reminds us, a house divided against itself cannot stand. It falls on every one of us to do our part, to strive to make our country and our society better than we found it. One of the goals of this podcast has always been to show the power of open and honest conversation. Hopefully, Doug's Front Porch can inspire you to start a dialogue with someone new. My resolution for 2025 is just that, to continue an open dialogue with my fellow man and to make sure that the world that I turn over to my children is better than the one that was given to me. I wish you all blessings in the new year. May you find and practice joy and humility. May you show the grace that so many people long to see and experience, and may your pots always be full of pork and sauerkraut. Here's to 2025. As we say in Pennsylvania Dutch, Halliges Najaar. Or as we say in English, Happy New Year, dear friends. Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Your ratings and reviews will help others find the show. You can follow along on Facebook, X, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. If you would like to financially support our endeavors, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. I thank you in advance for any contributions. Please feel free to tell all your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.